The 4-stage is technically considered an envelope, but unlike the envelopes we looked at before, this one does not require a note input, which just means that you could work with this on either an instrument track or an audio track, and it's going to behave in the exact same way. And here is how this behaves. It's more like an LFO in that it's going to repeat over and over and over again, but the shape is a bit closer to that of an envelope, and you as the user have a lot of control over that. So let's imagine that I was to set this to the amplitude and also to the filter cutoff here. And as you can see, it's just going to go through that cycle. But one thing you're going to notice immediately, and this is going to be true when we go to sync to the beat, that because this is always free running, this is not syncing up to the transport in any way at all. So if I click play, you can see how it's continuing to go through. So there's no ability to sync this to the transport. That is a huge kind of, I'm not going to say a misstep because I imagine they will add that in the future, but it starts to limit what you can do with this, and you have to be willing to let this kind of run just freely. And even though there's a snap to grid setting, you can see that in theory, every time I'm restarting from 1, I would like it to, start back at the beginning, and it just doesn't have that functionality. So you can either work in a seconds mode here, 1 second, you go up to 2 seconds, and everything in between, 2.5 would be 2.5 seconds, etc. Or you can go in and you can snap to the beat. And when you're snapping to the beat, 1 equals a quarter note. So we'll go down here and we'll change the looping so it's just going through 1 stage. And then what I can do is I can invert this, and then we'll have something that's a little bit closer to like, a side chain where you're setting it up yourself. So let's go in here, and what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to delete the one onto the gain right now, and I'm just going to go back and pull it down. Cool. So now you could listen. But remember, because this doesn't always start at the beginning, this really isn't a viable solution if you were going to be doing like a sidechain compressor type action, although that is now the popular way people do it. So hopefully in the very near future, they add in a sync to transport, because then this would be just insanely powerful, because you could imagine all the different shapes and things that you could create to go along with this. Not only that, but this one also gives you curves that you could take advantage of. So let's say you didn't want that kind of clicking at the end here, but you still want this to be a quarter note. You could actually go in and change this to something like, let's say 0.95. You could then have the second point active here in the loop, and you would change that to 0.05. So when you add those two together, what you do then have is a quarter note still. And now I could take the second point and just kind of bring it up a little bit and try to smooth things out. And there's just a lot you can get out of this thing. And then we could go and we could add in a half note to this party. Or maybe in this case, we'll add an eighth. That's pretty cool, isn't it? So I'd really love this one if there was those options that I'm talking about, and eventually having an ability to just kind of snap instead of having to get these things perfectly. That would be nice, because you do have to make sure that you are using that 1 equals a quarter note reference point. If you want, you can even go ahead and snap this so that you could have it go bipolar. So in this example, if I took 1 and I brought its point into a negative value, you'll now see how the volume is actually turning up, and then the filter frequency is jumping above that cutoff point that we have set. So I just need to kind of offset the amplitude here, or I could bring back the depth a little bit. And now with 2, I could do something else. So there is a lot of potential here, no doubt about it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause the video, come back, and show you one other cool thing you can do with the modulators, just to kind of jog your imagination so that you can come up with even better ideas. So one thing you could potentially do is actually use a button to either maybe like increase or decrease the length of time here. And the way I would do that is by going in, and I'm going to use addition in this example. You could use multiplication as well, although it might be a little harder to control. And then I'm just going to have this go for the entire range here and bring it all the way up. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to have the button control, and let's turn it on so we can see our range. I'm going to have the button control how much this extends by. And if you go to 0.1, it should be doubling the length, and we could actually check this, but it should be right because you can see we have 0.5, 0.5, and now it's lining up with the 3. Or we could actually bring it back by 0.5, and that should then half the time. So this would just be one quick example where I could say, all right, I'm going to have this button set up, and this button is going to then allow me to change the duration here. So something like that. And if you wanted, then you could have something modulating when the button is turning on and off. You could use like a random. The sky's really the limit here. So again, as I've said more than enough times in this video, this is probably going to become my favorite modulator once it gets souped up. I think for now, though, I'm kind of going to avoid it because there's not a lot of control. And the other thing that happens, and I'm not sure if this is a glitch or what's going on, when you go and you select this option here, what it does is it runs through the envelope once, and then it stops. You can see the little ball just sort of disappears, but then there's no way of having it restart again. It's just done. And so I'm not sure what that's all about, but you know, maybe there's a really good reason and explanation for it. But those are some of the things I've noticed about the 4-stage. And yeah, I can't wait to see what they do with this one in the future. Take it easy.